Welcome to the Quantum Healing Oracle. This is a channel dedicated to using reflections with astrology and tarot to help bring clarity, insight, and a deeper connection with your true soul self. My name is Pan. If you're new here, please like and subscribe. Today we're going to take a look at the full moon. It's occurring February 1st. And we're going to take a look at the astrology first, and then we're going to do a tarot reading and take a deeper look into the energies. Um, Please only take what resonates. Nothing's ever set in stone. There's always multiple paths available to you at any given time, and it's ultimately up to you to choose the path that works best for you. And if you'd like to skip ahead to the tarot reading, you'll find the timestamp in the description box. Okay, so when I look at the full moon that's happening, I think back to the new moon when that moon was moving through the conjunction with Pluto along with all of the inner planets. And it just felt like this small window of intense personal transformation that felt like it had a lot of motivation to it, had a lot of like fire and a lot of movement to it. And now what's happening is that the moon is all the way on the opposite side of the chart. And so it's still connecting with all those planets now that they've all moved through that conjunction with Pluto. And the moon is showing up in the sign of Cancer. And I'm reading a sidereal chart in this way. And I do read both tropical and sidereal charts. And in the future, I'm going to make a video as to why I use both charts and kind of what the difference is. But when I read new moons and full moons, I specifically look at sidereal charts because that's going to chart more accurately which constellation that the moon lines up with in the sky. And just like when we experience an eclipse, the alignment of the moon and the sun is what creates that effect and experience of the eclipse. So I always take into account what constellation most clearly lies behind the alignment between the moon and the sun during full moons and new moons. So the moon will be in Cancer, and when it was the time of the new moon and it was moving through Capricorn with Pluto and all of the inner planets, it just felt like a very constructive time. It felt like things got where the rubber meets the road, kind of like this is what is needing to happen. We're drawing up a plan and we're going to start moving. We're going to start moving in that direction to accomplish something. Now that the moon is on the opposite side and it's in Cancer, I'm just getting a different feeling from the way it's reflecting back on all those planets just move through that conjunction with Pluto. And it's much softer. It's much softer. It's more nurturing. There's much more of a feminine quality that is being brought to the energy of this full moon. And specifically because the energy of Cancer is about home and about family and feeling supported, and it really grounds you in the rooted emotional energy of feeling connected beyond yourself, feeling supported, and how that creates a stabilizing energy for our own connection with ourselves. And so I think it's important because with all these energies that have been pushing on change in specific ways that do seem to require action and for us to move forward, the opposite side of holding space for whatever these changes need to be in the most compassionate, nurturing, and connected way feels important at this time. It feels like we can't just power through these changes because these are the changes that need to happen. We need to hold space for these changes to unfold so that we can receive them as they're naturally coming through and release this idea that it's our ego that's, kind of trying to put its nose to the grindstone to get somewhere at this time. I feel like that's one of the biggest shifts that's coming out of the old paradigm, is that in the old paradigm, we very much had to make a plan and take action and focus on things in a very deterministic way where we were going to make it happen through will. And not to negate that energy or that approach, but I think in this new energy, in this new paradigm, we're using our presence and our ability to just respond to the energy that's available at any given time and to engage and act and flow into it, that allows things to be created more effortlessly, and we feel more connected as a process of nature in doing so. And so I feel like adding this kind of feminine element and this supportive element to the full moon is important at this time because we are, again, in this crucible of changing energies. According to the tropical charts, Neptune just entered Aries, and Saturn will be entering Aries soon. And this is, of course, leading to the Neptune Saturn conjunction in February, on February 20th. And when I read tropical charts, I look at the astrology as if it's more seasonal. That the zodiac signs actually represent more of the seasons on Earth and connected to the seasons on Earth. And of course, Aries is the season that happens in spring. It's the first season that initiates the new life that's coming forward. And so I feel like that's kind of what we're gearing up to. We're feeling the coming of the springtime, so to speak. This like spiritual spring where the frigid, frozen energies of that old world are beginning to thaw, and there's a new beginning that's being made available to us. And yet, we're not fully there yet, and it's a process. So it's kind of like knowing like how we're participating in this, knowing which patterns are changing for us personally, which is all this Pluto conjunct the inner planets. It's really showing us what are the patterns that we're not able to continue moving forward with. That's kind of our piece to contributing. And when we release those patterns, those outdated patterns that don't work, it becomes really easy to find the path that we feel most inspired to begin to move on. And so I think during this time, we're just going to notice a softer quality to the energy, even though there's still a loud undercurrent, of course. There's still a lot of energy in the world pushing back right now against circumstances and ideas that are just causing a lot of emotional upheaval. And there's one little piece that came through when I was tuning into the Cancer energy for myself and kind of relating it with what I've been going through. And when I think about family and I think about the love and the support of family, there's a couple different levels that I can feel that on. There's the nuclear family, the birth family, even my friends, my chosen family here. And that kind of creates one layer of this network of my connection with support and family. But then there's the soul family connection. And I feel like they serve different purposes, and although that they're connected, one of the main levels of challenge that humans have encountered here over the past several thousand years is our exploration and our investigation around morality. Like what we deem to be right and wrong, what appears to us as being a good action or a bad action, how that reflects on the events that we see in the world. And something that's come through about the difference between the way we have been raised in a nuclear family versus how we're shifting into a soul family is that in our nuclear family, morality plays a different role. And the best way I can exemplify this is if you look at how through certain religious ideologies, you can see how morality is actually divisive and kind of a subversive manipulation tactic or a way of trying to control other people. The classic one is the heaven and hell thing. You be a good person, you're going to go to heaven. If you mess up, you're going to go to hell. And that's kind of like it's leveraging human morality as a way of getting in alignment with certain belief systems that then you give your power over to that ideology or that institution. So I think what we haven't seen apparently here is that in our family dynamics, the way we've been raised with this same control structure where morality has been leveraged against us. Our own idea of morality has been leveraged against us to keep us in line with the ideology of the family. And that kind of transposes into the way we view our society. And so that's why there's still a lot of push and pull and judgment and the inability to hold space for certain events that happen in the world because we're seeing it through this moralistic lens that we're convinced is, if everything in the world could just be the way we want it to be in a good way, then the world would be good. And I don't really think that's what creation is about. I don't think that that's ultimately true. But I think we're needing to prove to ourselves that that's not true by dissolving our programming and our um, automated way of going about using that kind of moralistic judgment as a way of navigating what we think we're seeing in the world and how our emotions run. And this is why I was connecting it to the feeling of family, because family is supposed to make you feel connected, nurtured, safe, supported in expressing yourself and being yourself. And when we run the energy through that kind of moralistic framework, it doesn't actually support us emotionally. It doesn't support like who we really are and what we really need in a deep spiritual way. And that's why I think the soul family is coming in to kind of offer this bigger lens of how to hold space for all the choices and all the options that are happening here on earth. And I like the analogy of like when a parent's raising their children, they know that their children make mistakes as they grow, but they allow for those mistakes and they're there to gently guide the child back into, you know, keeping himself healthy, keeping himself, you know, happy on the right track. But inevitably, the process of watching children grow is them learning, watching them learn how to navigate and make choices, and how the the way they interact with the world has has consequences and has effects. And so I can see our soul family is really holding space for the human collective in a big way right now, for some of these learning curves, some of these growing pains where, you know, people who are still operating from this moralistic lens and running all the dysregulated emotions, um, because of that, the soul family is there offering this much bigger container of support and understanding to know that these things need to play out, that these circumstances need to happen and these lessons need to be learned, um, and that it's okay that there's so much upheaval. There's okay that there's so much emotional dysregulation. It's okay there's so much confusion about all this. But from the higher perspective, there's more support, there's more love, there's more compassion, there's more creativity and available uh, energy for things to actually be different than maybe that there's ever been before. And it's just harder for us to see it if we're still focusing in that smaller bandwidth where that confusion and that moralistic um, investigation is still happening. And I just get the sense that that's what a lot of the energy that's going to play out through this whole season, and I think through the whole Saturn Neptune conjunction as we move into the year here, is that if we look just in a shallow way on the surface and we feel that we don't understand why things may be happening the way that they're happening, if we can integrate those lessons as to why that seems to be out of place or out of balance in some way, we're very quickly going to expand into so many more potentials and so many more available opportunities to move forward. And yet, I think that they're connected. I think that people need to push through the resistance or move through the resistance or allow that resistance to resolve. Each person's different in their own journey. But as they let those focus points and those thoughts go in a certain way, then you move forward into a new creative potential that seems like, wow, I didn't even know this was possible. In a dream that I had this morning, I was watching a child who felt like he'd spent the summer with another family that he'd become very attached to, and it was the end of the summer, and then it was time for the child to go home, and the child was sad because he was like, "Oh, but I miss this family that I had that just been spending this time with." And as I watched a woman pick him up and hold him and be like, "It's okay. I understand that we're separating you from that used to support you." And then in the next scene, I was being shown that right next door, the neighbor's house, like that was just a regular neighbor at one point, all of a sudden had a giant, carnival ride, like a big spinning, ride on the property, and all these people were coming to ride the ride. And it was almost this huge surprise of like, oh my God, the neighbor can now have this amusement park ride at their place. And that was never really possible before. And yet there was some kind of stipulation in like in what was made available at that property that allowed that ride to be able to be brought there and allowed everybody to come there. And that's kind of how I feel that I'm tapping into this energy, is it's like letting go of that past way of being connected to what used to feel supportive, what used to feel like the family, and step into what is our true family that we feel we haven't seen for a while and really don't remember what that's all about, and let them show us the fantastic pot potentials and ideas that are ready to unfold, that we just wouldn't even believe are possible. But it does take that like time of nurturing where when the child was separated from the previous family, he was picked up by the, you know, what was the original family and held, and it's like, hey, I understand that you feel separated right now. And I think that's what I feel like this energy that's speaking through this Cancerian full moon is informing me about right now. Okay, so now let's take a look at the tarot. Let's see what else comes out from this energy. We have prosperity lies ahead, new moon in Taurus, past life, staying focused, hold the course, precision, and imagination. Okay, so yeah, so what I'm getting from this reading is that, you know, tapping into this past life energy, um, and staying focused really feels like kind of what I was talking about, being separated from what is no longer who you are. It's no longer what supports you anymore. That understanding that this was a past event, this was something that happened in the past, this was important to your exploration of self and who you were in the past, but to move forward with prosperity, which is this kind of like openness to the potential, openness to the idea of what's possible, what can lie ahead. It's not just about money, it's about, you know, what is possible to be experienced in life, the abundant nature of possibilities. And this guy kind of holding the eyeglass, looking out, you know, it's like, hold the course, stay focused, understand that we're kind of leaving the past behind, but eye on the prize that we're moving forward into this new reality. And I like how we have precision and imagination, because what this tells me is, you know, first of all, when I, you know, used to think that the imagination was just something that you make up in your mind and it's not real. And then after plant medicine experiences when I was younger, and then specifically when I got into studying QHHT, quantum hypnotherapy, I started to realize that the imagination is actually our connection to the quantum field itself, the part of ourselves that is connected to every potential available. That's why we can just close our eyes and imagine it or go into it, because that's an actual real reality that's not focused in the physical moment that we're experiencing, but it's a possibility or a potential. And so there is this like way that we use our imagination, and this is where once we understand the power of our imagination and what it's meant for, we can see and catch ourselves when we're using our imagination against ourselves. This is where when we imagine, you know, things that we don't wish to happen, we start imagining the possibilities that could play out that would be more traumatic or more tragic or create more scarcity or more lack. You know, there's nothing that's going to stop us and tell us we shouldn't use our imagination to imagine things getting worse. But we just don't need to. Like, that's a choice, right? And so that's part of this. I almost think that's part of this. What I was talking about is this moralistic framework for consciousness that's been programmed from an early age to just see things in a certain way, and that's just the way that it is, and we can make those final judgments based on that limited understanding. We're actually using our imagination to imagine things in a limited way. We're holding ourselves back, and we're if anything, recreating or bringing more of the same. And that's why when we see conflict, specifically conflict in certain mass movements, a lot of people get behind certain ways of seeing things, certain ways of judging others, certain ways of calling out what they think is the evil or the bad or the darkness. That's a strong collective movement of using your imagination to focus on a series of potentials that, if you didn't really want that to happen, you wouldn't focus on it being that way. But most people don't realize they have a choice to not focus on it or take their attention off of it because of the underlying beliefs in morality as to why they feel it's important to hold those beliefs in place. And so I think what this reading is saying, the overall energy here is saying, as we're leaving this past life behind and this old, outdated, moralistic framework that's been too rigid with limitation and control, we need to stay focused on the possibilities and the potential that lie ahead and precisely learn to use our imagination to focus on those potentials that we want to experience. Think of those things that we want to see happen in our lives, and to know and to live more and more in that place that your soul self already knows that it can imagine anything and it will come to pass. And this is just the human ego grasping that concept and learning how to utilize that in a more specific way. And this is again why big thing I think around the Saturn Neptune conjunction is it's really getting. I've spoke about this in a video last week or a couple weeks ago. That we're being able to see that specifically what we imagine, what we envision, the frequencies that we choose are the ones that we shift into. Saturn's the one that makes it real. Neptune's all the possibilities you can choose from. If you're going to get disciplined and understand that you wish to step in a specific reality, then that's what frequency, that's what you'll focus on, that's what you'll give your attention to. And anything else, we learn to have the discipline to not give it our attention because we are not wanting to shift into those realities. Okay, so let's take a look at the center here of the reading. We have 7 of Wands crossed by the 4 of Cups. Okay, so the 7 of Wands is really the it's kind of the warrior card. It's kind of like the standing up for what you believe in, understanding the capability and the strength that you have to act on your beliefs, to move forward into challenging circumstances with a level of confidence and capability. And the 4 of Cups is about being supported emotionally, having emotional support. We have the moon in Cancer right here. And so I think this is just a strong indicator that as we stand up for what we believe in, as you stand up for what you believe in, as you approach the challenges that are being presented with a level of confidence and courage, lean into the emotional stability of it. It's almost like if you feel emotionally stable and you feel like you can move forward and face challenges, then move forward. If you can't anchor into that emotional stability, then take a break or go into retreat, go back into a place and let that energy dissipate until you can regain the emotional stability and then move forward again. It's kind of like, I've always said when you're in any kind of relational dynamic and you're in any kind of conflict, as long as one or both sides is triggered, you can't get anything accomplished. You can't actually move forward and find a solution. You kind of have to wait for that trigger to dissipate, and then the energy can move forward in a productive way. So it feels like there's challenge. There's definitely circumstances that are wanting to move forward, and they will be assisted in being moved forward by your connection with your own emotional stability when you're in tune with that emotional regulation. Okay, so here we have the past energies. We have the Aeon, which is the Temperance card in this deck, and we have the Sun. So this is a beautiful past energy. This is just really showing the expansion of the self to incorporate more of the light of the soul. This is just really the sun represents the light of the soul, the soul's energy, the soul's essence shining through in an unfiltered way. Um, and the Aeon is about kind of the growth where you expand to take on the bigger form. It's kind of like, you know, when the snake sheds its skin, because it's expanding. It grows into a new skin that's bigger, that can accommodate its own expansion. And when you step into this higher way of being, it's like you have a broader perspective of everything. It's almost like when you're in that more limited space of the ego, you're stuck within your body and you're only viewing things through the lens of what you think is happening to you as a separate person. But when you incorporate the light of the soul, the energy of the soul, all of a sudden it's like you expand and your consciousness starts operating as a field that includes your body, but that ultimately now you're watching yourself and your body, but from this higher perspective, navigate in a world, but you're also perceiving all these energies around you as ways of understanding how to navigate the body, navigate the consciousness through the world. And it can do that much more effectively because it has more information, it has more understanding, and it has more light being shown on the truth of who you really are in this expanded way. So this is great. This is this expansion. Let's see if it looks like in the future. Okay, Eight of Cups crossed by the Four of Pentacles. Okay, so what this energy is talking about is that basically for you to step into a more grounded, empowered, embodied way of moving in the world, there are certain dynamics, certain relational dynamics, certain ways of engaging the emotions that need to be detached from. You know, the Eight of Cups is the classic, you know, walk away, just walk away. But there's a reason why we walk away. It's because whenever there's a power imbalance, there's a reason why you stay in situations when there's a power imbalance. Like one of the old examples of this were people who were staying in abusive relationships. And then even though they're being hurt and they know that something's not right about the relationship, there's something else that keeps them in it and keeps them coming back and keeps that cycle repeating itself. And to me, the point of having any of those repetitious cycles, and of course this could be an abusive relationship, but most likely it's just a power imbalance. It's a power dynamic that's happening, and they usually play out in relational dynamics with other people. And it's just so that it can show you that who you were, this kind of smaller, more separate form of self, is attached to having certain things and being in certain relationships and getting its needs met in specific ways that's very transactional. That's very like, this is how I show up, this is how I get my needs met, this is how I do this for them, this is what they do for me. That's been a survival mechanism of the ego. But there's riddled within that all kinds of power dynamics where you're not deeply connected to the creative ability of your own soul's potential to just create a much more harmonious experience. Your soul's wisdom says you don't actually need anybody to play any specific role or to give you anything at all to have what you need. You need to realize you have everything within you, and when you open up and just allow that energy to flow, it very easily presents itself, and all your needs are met, and all the relationships balance and are harmonious. But if we're giving our attention to anything or anyone that is draining our energy, that's putting a drain on our own connection to ourselves, where that energy is not going to creating new potential and moving forward, that's why it comes up as feeling like something's not right. We always, you know, when you talk about a power imbalance or power dynamic, you can almost always feel or sense it'll, like the image will come into your mind of who it is and what it is. Like, it's really easy to see power dynamics when you're looking for them. And so what this future energy is talking about is that as you move forward, what you're looking to do is have some more discernment around where your energy goes and who it connects with and what it is that you're doing with your day-to-day consciousness. And this is where, even your imagination, to have more discernment. Where are you focusing your attention? Is that something that you want to see happen? Is that outcome and energy filling you up and making you feel inspired, or is it making you feel drained and causing you to kind of spiral into the lower expression of certain emotions? This is the process. And again, like I was saying, how the compassion of the soul family is like they're here to guide humanity as they go through these growing pains. That's what the growing pains are. The growing pains are humanity waking up to where it's not in balance and it's outsourcing its own power or its connection to itself, and just running energy or imagination in a way that doesn't serve. And once there's a discernment mechanism that comes in, it's just like, let's say when it comes to relationship, anytime you're going to connect with anybody for any reason, run it through your discernment. Does this lift me up or does it drain me? And then if you know that, then you can choose to only connect with the people who lift you up. If someone you've been connecting with is draining you, you can see that. You can make a choice and say, no, I'm actually only going to make the choice to connect with people that lift me up and not drain me. And this is not judgmental. This doesn't make them a bad person. That's why, when we look at it again through the moral framework, it's very black and white. We're judging people as good or bad. We're looking at it in that lens. But when we look at it from the higher framework, where everything's okay and all choices are a part of it, discernment becomes the mechanism that even though I can say, yes, I don't resonate with what they're doing, I don't feel like I am in harmony in this relationship anymore, they're not a bad person. They can continue to do whatever it is that they're doing. I'm just not going to choose to bring my energy into that connection with them. That's how we resolve this moral dilemma, is that we learn to hold a field of non-judgment for everyone and all the choices that they want to make. But we just choose to not engage those that don't resonate with what lifts us up and makes us feel most connected to ourselves. Okay, so here, inner influences, Two of Cups, outer influences, the Fool. So this is really nice energy because the Two of Cups, and I don't traditionally do readings in the form of, oh, your next romantic partner's coming, or oh, love's coming into your life, because personally, I just don't see love that way anymore. I see love as being the fabric of all of reality. It's all of creation. It's always there. It's with everybody. It just depends on whether we feel connected to it or not. And when we feel connected to love, then we can experience it. We can experience it in all our relationships. We can experience it even when we're completely alone. We're not looking for that person or that thing to complete us and bring love into our lives. We realize it's already there. So I feel like that's one of the messages of this Two of Cups in this position, is that this is an inner influence. This is you feeling connected to the field of love, understanding that connection is available within you, within your soul family, within yourself, and that entire connection, the way that it runs for you internally, is the way that you'll show up externally. And it's also the way that the world will reflect back to you. And that's why the most important thing when we apply some of the teachings around reaching neutrality and releasing judgment and kind of bringing in forgiveness and all of that, is that when we find this deep inner connectivity to love, we can't not see that loving presence anywhere we look. Even if we were to look into the most chaotic, destructive circumstances, we would still see the presence of love there, because we're cultivating it from within our own being and our connection to our spirit and our soul. And we know that that's just the truth. And we know that truth exists everywhere. And so the external influences is the Fool. And this is kind of a card of just, being willing to move forward and set off in whatever direction that you wish to experience, and know that everything can be made new. Everything can be re-seen and experienced in a surprising, abundant way that we didn't know was possible. It's kind of like that in that dream where that child that was mourning kind of the separation from that family it was with temporarily, all of a sudden was elated that there was a theme park next door. Like that's an example of this looking to the external, um, people, places, and things that can show up in your life and just show you that there's a newness, that there's something there that was never there before, and to just notice that, notice the new creative potentials that are occurring. Because if we stay focused again in this moralistic framework of right and wrong, we're only going to see the way the world's always been. Like that's the reason why this past life card I think comes up, is that it's really clear to see the way the past is played out is still playing out itself out now. Like all the patterns are there. But if we only focus on those old patterns, then we're only recalling and reimagining and re-experiencing those things from the past, where there's so much newness, fresh energy, and new surprising potential available to us. But it's requiring us to kind of stay focused and use that precise imagining to focus on those new potentials. And when we notice those new potentials, to recognize that we noticed them and that we saw something in a more expanded way, or saw something new that wasn't there. It wasn't there before. Okay, so here is the gateway, the archetype that's wanting to be embodied that will lead to the outcome. And this is Seven of Cups. So the way I read the Seven of Cups in this deck is that it has to do with the addictive nature of running old emotional patterns. And, I use a very simple analogy when just to describe this, is that if you love eating Oreo cookies and you buy a package of Oreo cookies and the first cookie you eat, it just brings you into complete bliss. It's just amazing how delicious they are. But you continue eating the Oreo cookies, by the time you've eaten the whole package, you don't feel good anymore. And so what started out as this deep emotional feeling of satisfaction, when it's overused or abused to some degree, that same emotional response becomes something that feels terrible. And it's just recognizing that we're running these kind of patterns in our lives all the time, that we're repeating doing certain things because it used to make us feel good, but it's not anymore. And just being brutally honest with ourselves about, okay, that's a pattern from the past. I think that I'm done with that. And, there is always a nurturing element to this. It's just like that child that was separated from the previous family. Like, he had to let go. He had to let go of that thing that was supportive for him at that time, and that was hard. But as he kind of mourned the loss of that old system, he was able to be open to the new system. And this is just what's happening in our consciousness, is that we can see the old patterns, we can see the things that may not be deeply as satisfying as they used to be or we thought they were. And we can see how this connects with where we need to set boundaries, where we need to rectify power imbalances, where we need to bring new discernment in. Like, this is, there's a lot of water in this energy, as I was kind of expecting there would be with the Cancer moon. But this is using our connection to our emotions as navigation tools and ways of being very discerning of the channels that our energy runs in. So if I were to say to this point, it's highlighting the idea that when we run our emotions through, let's call it that old lower moral framework, we're going to stay stuck and we're going to stay more disempowered. But if we have the courage to kind of step into a new set of beliefs and expand into a higher expression of being supported and a higher expression of ourselves, we're going to utilize this discernment. We're going to utilize the way our emotions are running, and we're going to step forward into something new and something ultimately that's much more aligned with who we truly are, this larger framework of family and support. Okay, so the outcome of this situation is the Hermit. And the Hermit can represent kind of going within, but mostly I like to reinforce that to me, the Hermit has taught me about sourcing on your own inner light, sourcing your own energy, going within for what you need. If anything makes you feel like you need something from the outside in order to be okay, that's the sheer sign that you need to go within and find that you have that. within you. And especially now at a time where it's like the reflection of the external world is becoming increasingly more unstable. It's more and more important to go within and see that we're not relying on the external world to have our needs met and be okay. That is that lower framework of separation and, are we doing the right thing to get what we need? Or are we going to be punished and suffer and die for not? Like, that's really what's kind of being let go here, is that any level of attachment to this transactional nature of thinking that we're here on earth and alive and fulfilled because of these certain components in the external world. If we feel threatened that those external components were to disappear tomorrow, that's where we need to do the inner work and go deeper into the soul self, into the knowing that we generate our entire reality from the place that we're experiencing ourselves. We're creating it ourselves. Everything in the outside is just a reflection of our own energy, of who we already are. And so, again, going back to this precision, imagine what it is that you want to live. What kind of life do you want to live? Who do you want to be in this world? And then go within that light and know that the rest of the world and every detail that you could imagine about this reality could totally change, but you would have everything that you would need to support yourself in moving forward with who you desire to be. That's just the way that it is versus the way that we believe that it was. Okay, so we're going to draw a few more cards here just to clarify. Eight of Wands, Three of Cups, and the Seven of Swords. Okay, so this layer of the reading feels like, yeah, there's going to be movement. There's going to be rapid energy that's moving, and yet we have the potential of being supported with these changes. It's almost as if this energy is shifting and everybody's going through it at the same time. Then we have so much potential of people showing up in our lives that we wouldn't expect to show up in our lives, or people being there to share and support us, that because it's part of their journey to be supported by us as well. And so it's kind of to expect, as changes escalate, there to be more support. And one of the things that when people talk about certain people being disadvantaged, and I don't believe anyone's actually more or less disadvantaged. I just think that our challenges are different. And it's like when people talk about how privileged we are in the United States versus other countries, then they're just kind of talking about money. They're talking about how, in general, Americans and people in the United States have more money, relatively speaking, to, let's say, people in Africa. And the way Spirit's shown it to me is that they're just a different focus. Like in America, sure, we have focused on a more individualistic way of being, so that we can cultivate our uniqueness in a way, but it's much more isolating. We spend a lot more time separated from other people. And yes, we may be more abundant in the material world, but in community sense, we feel really far away from each other oftentimes, even with our own neighborhoods or our own families. Whereas you look at someone like Africa, and they may not have as much financial abundance, but their families are close-knit, and their communities are singing and dancing and operating together in a way that we don't experience anything like that. And I've never been to Africa, so I don't really know. I'm just using it as this way of saying that I feel like for people in affluent countries, and specifically in America, when changes shift in a certain way, I could see there being a reprioritization and a refocusing on our connections that we have with other people and our communities, and not just communities in a static way, but the way that we interact and have our needs met in relationship to the communities that we live within. I can see there being changes within that structure, and that just knowing that no matter what it is that appears to be changing, we have as much support to navigate those changes. Although there is always going to be an element that's not in service to your highest good. Meaning, You're just as much as you're going to have support, all the support on one side, you're going to have these other people that would want to take advantage of you on the other. And that's why this whole power dynamic thing is important to iron out now, before these changes have really escalated in a way that we get really clear about this discernment and how to use our broader energy senses to realize, oh, you're in alignment, you lifting me up, we're connecting, let's move forward. We're not in alignment, this energy is draining me, let me not move forward here. Is going to This whole discernment is going to be vital as we move forward into changing circumstances in our society, because we have the potential of merging and blending with more community energy and more people that can be much more supportive, but will also be much more discerning over those that still may not have our best interests at heart, and that's important. Okay, so here we have shadow clearing and infinite self-realization. Okay, so what this layer of the reading is suggesting is that this is a time of continued shadow work, but in the most gracious way possible. Meaning that, just like I was saying about how in that moralistic framework, like those conflicts occur in that framework so that you can see that there's elements of utilizing that framework that aren't in harmony with your souls. It's not in harmony with the perception of who you are at a higher level. And that's why those conflicts have to come up as moral conflicts, so that it can really illuminate the truth of how to broaden your sense of inclusiveness, utilize discernment, and allow all things to be while you move forward in the most empowered way that you can for yourself. This is where, I love infinite self realization, is that there's so much to be learned. There's so much to be learned because of the shadow energy that's coming up to be cleared. And I think when you can see it through this lens that the soul family is looking at it from, is that it's an amazing and a beautiful endeavor to have so much darkness and so much misaligned energy come up, because it's so ripe with transformation. And we may almost, feel like it's overwhelming at some point, or like how much crazier that can the world get. I think the more crazy we see the world getting, there's a better sign that there's more and more people waking up to the truth. If we weren't ready to handle this kind of self-realization, there wouldn't be this much coming up all at once. I think that's the sheer sign that when you really trust life as the orchestration, that always serving your highest good, you can allow whatever that needs to come up and utilize it, and trust that others are utilizing it in their best capacity to find that next level of being, that next way of moving as our soul self in this world, the next way of feeling that I am intentionally focusing on this set of potentials within my experience that feels so inspiring and exciting. I feel so supported in my spirit team and in my reality to allow this aspect of my true authentic being to emerge in this world. Like, that's where this is going. But any of the layers of consciousness that are just would be stuck and not allow each person to step into that clear knowing are going to come up and lead to more awakenings, more understandings, more realizations. Okay, so I drew a card from the Rumi Oracle, and I got Dance of the Divine Feminine. Yeah, I'm not surprised, because I got this just very strong feminine energy of support, this very compassionate Kuan Yin, ultimate compassion, ultimate allowance, ultimate nurturing. How do we see the lens of these changes through the most compassionate perspective and appreciate that we're supported, even though it seems sometimes like we're not. Dance of the Divine Feminine. If a tree could move from one place to another, it would not suffer the pain of the saw or the oppressive wounds. If the sun and the moon stood still like the rocks, they could not offer brilliance. How bitter the taste of water would be if the river stopped its flow, remaining still like seawater. When the seawater rises to become a cloud, it loses its bitterness and pours the rain of sweetness. I have given you only a few examples. You can figure out the rest. Break away from the self and enter the kingdom of love. It says, you may feel unsettled, beloved, as though the ground beneath you is not so solid. You may touch it to see. Is it moving? Of course, it is hurtling through the skies, spinning, tilted on its axis. It's amazing you aren't passed out on the floor in utter dizziness, yet you stand there, imagining you have a choice of not moving. What funny foolishness. Let us laugh about it together. How can you even imagine it? Only through some misplaced fear. It has such a small craziness, really. You cast it off, that small crazy fear. Let it return to the Earth Mother and become fertilizer for a far grander and more exciting insanity of divine love instead. Give up that tiny insanity in favor of the greater craziness of love. You cannot be unmoved by it. The rhythm of life will get you shaking your hips eventually. How could you not be entranced by the gleaming dance floor, shimmering with possibility and invitation? The oracle comes to you with guidance. Your life may feel as though it is being tipped upside down. Perhaps you feel as though the great beloved, in a feisty mood, has grabbed your ankles, is holding you upside down and shaking you wildly until your skirt is over your head or the pockets of your pants become freed of their contents. Keys and wallet dropping to the floor in disarray. Your hair is messy, your bottom is in the air, and your sense of orientation is nowhere to be found. Blood is rushing to your head, and goodness knows you just want to be put down to have a moment to come to your senses. So the beloved will give you that gift, but don't imagine it will last too long. The great beloved esteems you capable of so much more than being sure-footed and sensible. You're capable of more whirling, not stumbling, while inspired by the music of the spheres. If you just accept the great invitation to dance, there won't be so much roughhousing going on. It won't be needed because your hair is already being a mess. The blood will already be pumping, and you'll be sweating, laughing, smiling, and dancing. The great beloved will be alive in you, which is the grand seducer ever wanted in the first place, even with all the jokes and horseplay. So what this is getting at is that as the energies change, as things escalate, as things get more wild and crazy, it's possible to see this craziness as part of the love that is woven into our experience. That's why I was saying, like, when you really understand yourself as love and you expand your ability to hold space for all the forms and ways that it can arise, you won't see anything else. And that's really the greatest challenge of all humanity. Even though each of our paths are different, each of our lives are different, the main goal is the same, is to come here, forget who you are, and then wake up, remember the truth of what this is really all about. And this is the great challenge, but it's the great exaltation, it's the great ecstasy of returning to the awareness of yourself as this cosmic play of divine love itself. And so I can feel there's just a strong feminine presence that is holding space for the changes as they occur. With what's held within it is both the nurturing capacity of nurturing that child to let them know, hey, I understand you're mourning the loss of what you once felt supported by, and the wisdom of, but I'm preparing you to experience the ride of your life. You know, like that kind of transition is being held in the sweetest way and infused with such divine wisdom that when we tap into it, we surrender to it, and we allow that to sustain us and support us, we'll be more resilient and we'll be more capable as we begin to move forward into uncharted territory. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Again, please like and subscribe, share this video with your friends. If you'd like to support the channel, there's links in the description box, and also my email if you'd like to reach out for a reading. All right, I'll see you next time.